Acknowledge that the meeting is being recorded. So before we officially start, I just wanted to go over a few things. First of all, thanks everybody for participating, those in our budget committee. I know it's a lot of work and a lot of numbers, but we really do appreciate your input. So we're conducting this as a virtual meeting, which we feel in this time meets all the standards the state requires of a public meeting. In the event that a member of the budget committee loses connection, or if you have a technical issue, you can call Dina at the fire station number. That's 541-997-3212. If you lose your internet connection and we can't get you back on, we'll try and have you call in like somebody's doing here. So,
yep, we got more people coming in.
Good. If at any time you have a question, it's been working just to speak up. So that's fine. If we find that you can't get a word in, then you can either use the raise your hand feature on Zoom, or you can simply do something like this and we'll try and recognize that you have a question. We really do value your questions and want you to be able to ask, and so that we can answer those. So don't be afraid to speak up. So any questions on the logistics? Okay, I'd like to call to order the Western Lane Ambulance District Budget Committee meeting for fiscal year 2020-2021. If you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, Dina will have a flag you can face if you don't have a flag handy. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I think we should mute everybody when we do the Pledge of Allegiance. It's tough. Holly, can you do a roll call, please?
Yes. Budget Committee members: Jody O'Mara, R.J. Pilcher,
Here.
Joel Marks,
Here.
then Western Lane directors: Director Yesney,
Here.
Director Russell, Director Farnsworth,
Here.
Director Webb,
Here.
Director Murphy.
Here.
Do we know who that's not Cindy, is it, on the phone?
I don't believe so. We have a phone number 541-954-1237. Can you identify yourself?
Derek.
It's who?
It's not Cindy, that's okay.
I think it's Jared Pearson, or Jared from the newspaper, right?
No, that's Derek Mullen's cell phone.
Oh,
Okay, so because I've got Derek on another screen, so he must have two people
Okay.
there.
So at this point, we need to appoint a budget committee president. So we're accepting nominations and seconds from the floor.
Chief, I would like to nominate John Murphy again this year as Budget Committee President.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Larry?
Any other nominations for board or for budget committee president? So we only have one nomination. All in favor of John Murphy as president? Can you raise your hand and wave it? Anybody opposed? Same sign? Okay. President Murphy, I will turn the meeting over to you.
Okay.
Chief, you need to read or refer to the budget message first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Time out. So you received your budget document and you received the budget message. I'm not going to read that verbatim unless you would like me to, but you all have it, a copy of it. Sorry for you the multiple copies, but we had some last second changes we thought were very important. We wanted you to be able to see that. So you have those documents, and be going through our budget later on, and we'll go through the entire budget message. So we will go over every point in there. Okay. Now, Budget Committee President Murphy.
Okay, before we start, I'm gonna change our logistics a little bit than when the chief said. As we're going through the budget, after we get through each section, so after we review the budget summary and tax revenue, I will call on every budget committee member to see if you have any questions. That way we are not walking on top of each other. And then as everybody else is speaking, if you have a question, then please raise your hand and Dina will acknowledge you when nobody is talking, because you can see all the hands, can't you, Dina?
Yes, I can.
Okay. And then that way we don't walk on top of each other. And when you please start to speak, please identify yourself before you speak. And if we have any motions to be made at the end of the meeting, please identify yourself if you're going to make a motion for the record. So let's review the budget summary. First, we got any public comments?
We
Do the minutes first.
have to do the minutes from last year.
Minutes of May 13th, 2019. I would entertain a motion after we have a first and a second, then we will have discussion on the minutes.
This is Jody. I move we approve the minutes from the 2019 Budget Committee meeting.
Second.
Who seconded?
Mike.
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 Like what?
We have a first and a second. Have we any discussion on the minutes, changes that need to be made before we vote?
I have a question.
Okay, Joel?
The last time I asked about part-time employee wages on the EMTs was $98,000. I just have a question if it's the same now.
I'm sorry, say again your question, Joel?
On page 2 of the minutes,
Yeah.
it has, I had asked a question the last year in the meeting we had, and it was on EMTs. The 15 part-time EMTs wages were $98,000. My question is that the same this time?
Joel, please save that question as we go through personnel services.
Okay,
Then that would be the appropriate time. We're just reviewing
good. We'll do
last
it.
few minutes.
We'll do it.
Any other questions on the minutes? I'm just going to ask for all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Do we have any public comments of the people that have joined our meeting? None at this time. So we will review the proposed 2020-2021 budget, and we will start with the budget summary and tax revenues. Is Chief or Dina going to take us through this?
Yes, so I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully. Okay. Can everybody see just the PowerPoint slide?
Yes.
No notes or anything?
Yes.
We're good? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So we still have video, a list, or we can see people on the screen. So again, if you have a question, we should be able to get to it. I wanted to start with, I can get this going. Just a brief review of how we're doing so far this fiscal year. Now, one of the big impacts that we did see, we started Western Lane Fire and EMS Authority, or WLFIA. So this resulted in moving some expenditures from personnel services to materials and services. So we did see a decrease in our personnel services cost, but then this is matched by an increase in materials and service costs. In general, we're on target for expenses. We have one potential major capital purchase this year, and that would be the base radios we're replacing on Herman Peak. This was at $100,000. We were just at the final stages of getting a USDA grant to cover that when the pandemic hit. We're hopeful that that money is still available and that we can receive that grant. We don't know that. We may not find out before July 1, so we may have to move this purchase to next year's budget. You won't see that reflected in our proposed budget, but this is money we put aside this year, so it would still be available. Revenue in general is ahead of projections this fiscal year, mainly due to an increase in our transport revenue. I'll describe in detail a little bit later how our transport revenue is looking, but at this time we expect to be probably 200 to 300,000 above our budgeted amount. This is even with the effects of the pandemic, and I've got a couple slides. We'll go into more detail on what we think the effects of the pandemic might be. In fact, I want to talk about some major budget impacts or potential major impacts for fiscal year 21. There's two major events. Our desire is always to present a budget that's 100% accurate, and we have complete faith in all the numbers. But as we discuss these impacts, I think you'll see how they could inject some variability into our predictions. Of course, we're going to have to talk about COVID-19, the pandemic, and I'll be looking at some impacts on the property taxes received and on our transport revenue. And we're also currently in the middle of labor negotiations with Local 851. That's the local that represents our line personnel. And of course, the results of these negotiations won't be done before we approve this budget. So there could be some variability from the negotiations. So when we talk about property tax revenue, just real briefly, so everybody's on the same page about this. So the state calculates two values when looking at property taxes to be paid. The real market value, or RMV, that's what your property would sell for on January 1st. And then the taxable value, also known as the maximum assessed value, which was set in 1997 at 90% of the RMV at that time. So our taxable value can increase at most by 3% per year, while the real market value just varies as the market dictates. So your property tax bill is based on whichever one is lower. So you can see in this graph, you can see our total real market value is the top yellow line. That's the real market value of our district. And below that, we have taxable value in pink. So when we talk the assessed value of the district, we're normally talking about that, the pink line there. And you see we just hit a little over $2 billion of assessed value for our district. So our district experienced a general decline in real market value, which lasted until about 2013, 2014 timeframe, probably due to the recession that started in 2008, but it's been gradually increasing since then. So for us to see a decrease in taxes imposed, it would require the real market value, that yellow line, to go below the pink line. That would represent about a 30% drop in property values. And when I say taxes imposed, I mean the tax bills that a property owner will receive. So even if we don't see that 30% decline in property values, so the tax imposed remains the same, it's possible that some people may have to defer their tax payments, which would lead to a decrease in revenue for us. But it's important to remember this would only be a deferral of taxes owed. The tax liability would remain with the property, so we assume at some point we would recoup that revenue. So our conclusion, at least for the near term, is we won't see an impact from the pandemic on tax revenue. And again, we won't know until November, until we start receiving our tax revenue. And this follows guidance from the Lane County assessor, who thought that maybe we might see a 1 to 2% decrease in tax revenue. But again, there's a lot of unknowns right now. So there's also the potential of COVID-19 impacting our transport revenues. So to look at transport revenues, what I've graphed are monthly billables for the last 4 fiscal years, which is the top line. And you see a lot of variability. And I've got a second graph that removes some of that variability. And then the bottom line, the jagged line, is our monthly collections. So billables, the amount we bill, that's usually, you'd expect that to be a month, 2 months, 3 months ahead of what we collect as people pay their bills. So there is no direct correlation for 1 month between those two. So for this fiscal year, which is on the far right, you can see our billables started out quite a bit above average, which was very nice to see. And then we see that gradual downturn in billables. But the question is that what we would actually see in a normal year? And I think there is so much variability, it's hard to say, but we do see less call volume during winter time, late winter, early spring. So you'd expect billables to go down. Collections, which is that bottom line, also started out very good this fiscal year. And that's, as I mentioned earlier, we already hit our predicted budget for transport revenue, and we still have 6 weeks left to go. So we did see another decrease in early spring, which again is not unusual. And if I just take out some variability, so this is just the last 2 fiscal years. So it's a little bit easier to see, but it's still showing, you know, we started out really good at the beginning of the fiscal year and then it decreased. But the question is just our normal seasonal variation. And then the last data point I think which we can look at is it affecting our call volume. So this is just call volume for 2 fiscal years, or the last 2 years. And again, I don't see anything to indicate that we're seeing an impact from the pandemic, and this may yet to be seen. We may see a difference. But the one thing we haven't looked at is the call mix, and I know Chief House is very interested in looking at this. So we could see a change in calls where instead of people wanting to be transported to the hospital where we'd have revenue, they just want a paramedic to come check them out, maybe do some minor assistance, what we call treat and release, and then leave the patient at their home. And we're happy to do this if it's appropriate, but we don't get any revenue from that.
Chief, sorry to interrupt, but just for the record, Director Russell just joined the meeting.
Okay. Welcome, Cindy. So currently there's no revenue for us for treat and release. There is some talk of Medicare reimbursing us for that. That would be a welcome addition. But again, it's just talk right now. I haven't heard anything further. So we haven't seen a significant decrease in billables or collections. So it's hard to say that we're running more transport, non-treat, non-transport type of calls, but the data is just not showing that. So I don't think we'll see an impact on property taxes imposed, and I haven't seen an impact on revenue, transport revenue yet. So keep that in mind. We've looked at it. We're paying close attention to what the pandemic will have, what kind of impact it will have on us. But unfortunately, right now, I have no data to say there's going to be a negative or a positive impact. So then the second major budget impact is our labor negotiations. Our current collective bargaining agreement, which goes into detail on wages and benefits, among other things, expires on June 30th of this year. And the major cost in our organization, in any organization, most likely is wages and benefits of personnel. So when negotiations ongoing, we can't predict exactly what our final labor costs will be. We put in our best estimate of what we need the final numbers to end up as, but with the understanding that the board may have to make some minor adjustments in the budget depending on the outcome of the negotiations. One thing that is different, we're going to try and go with a 1-year contract instead of the standard 3-year contract. And that's mainly due to the unknown impacts or long-term impacts of the pandemic, which we'll still need to determine. So just a few more prep slides to get everybody on the same page. I've developed a spreadsheet just to look at, where we feel the future of our financial position might be. It's worked. I think it's worked very good. But we're proposing a very lean budget with a lot of major impacts. So I wanted to take a minute just to explain why we did that and why we feel it's necessary. So the first slide I'm going to show you is our current conditions. So if we continue on the same path that we have been, how we're going to look financially over the next several years. In the second graph, I'm going to show our proposed budget, how that looks, and it's just a summary of expenses and revenues, essentially. And then the third one is just with some variability put in and some changes put in to make it more of a sustainable budget. Again, that's up to the budget committee to decide which direction we go. It's just an opportunity to show that there are some things that we can do to address our financial situation. With that said, here's the model. So this is where we currently stand, and I'll explain the colors here and the bars. So what you're looking at are monetary values on the y-axis and then fiscal year along the x-axis. The tan bars on the left represent the ending fund balance as obtained from our audits. Then the red bars also represent ending fund balance, but these are what we predict they'll be in the current year and going forward. And then the blue bars represent the profit or loss for the year. A blue bar greater than 0, of course, represents a profit. For you CPAs in the audience, I'm sorry if I'm going very basic, but this is how I understand it, at least. So, and then the yellow line, that represents what is needed for our dry period financing. So the way I look at it is that any year in which the red bar is not greater than the value represented with the yellow line, we won't have enough funds to cover expenses from July to November. And you can see that is the majority of our future going with current conditions. So I have taken into account that we receive transport revenue each month. So the amount of money we need to have for our dry period financing at the end of the year is actually less than what we need to spend, because we do rely on that transport revenue. So our position is that we can't sustain the status quo without a dramatic increase in revenue, which is very difficult to achieve, or a decrease in expenses. And that's what you're going to see with our proposed budget, is a decrease in expenses. So in this graph, you see 2022, we predict we won't have enough in our ending fund balance for our dry period financing. So we're proposing to push that out with the cuts that we would like to make into 2023, possibly into 24. So it pushes it out about 2 years. And I'll go in detail over our proposed budget, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. This is just generally just to show why we came up with that budget. So this is the same proposed budget, but I've made an additional $300,000 in cuts, and it'll be apparent why I chose $300,000. But you can see that that's what we're looking for. We're looking for financial stability. We have a decent ending fund balance, and it's consistently above our dry period financing needs. So now we're getting into the budget. So this is what we used, and we'll go into detail on the actual numbers, but this is how we arrived at the numbers. So with wages, so in general, we're proposing a very lean budget, major impacts on wages and benefits. We know that. We're absolutely aware of the tremendous impact this will have on our employees. And none of the numbers we came up, none of the values we came up with, we didn't come up with those lightly. We know that it's going to be tremendously hard on everybody, but we're just at a situation that we have to make some difficult cuts. The contract we agreed upon 3 years ago set the district on a path which we feel is unsustainable, and we definitely feel that we have to address those issues now. So within the budget for wages, see that we are not proposing a cost of living increase. We are open to keeping step raises for those employees that are eligible, but that's to be determined yet. We have removed 3% bonus for critical care paramedic certification. We want to keep the requirement to maintain the CCP, or the critical care certification. We do rely on those individuals, and nearly all our paramedics are certified at the CCP level. It does bring in a significant amount of revenue for us. We can charge a higher amount for these type of calls. With healthcare, we're proposing to switch to a low deductible. We're proposing to switch to a high deductible from the low deductible plan. Removing the current VIBA. And VIBA, if you're not familiar with that term, that's very similar to a health savings account, an HSA. Changing dependent coverage from 90% employer paid to 50% paid. And then within our retirement obligations, changing the IAP or individual account program from employer paid to employee paid. So now we'll get into some numbers. And John, I don't know if this fits in with what you wanted to do. I'm not going to go line by line. I certainly can. I was just going to get some important points, but of course, and show in the tab where people can go to get line by line, but of course we'll answer any questions for any amount.
After you get through with this section, Chief, I will ask every budget member if they have any questions for you.
Perfect, thank you. So you can see, you'll find this information on tab 2. So our beginning fund balance, we just updated that to $2,100,000, and thanks to Rick for helping us work through the draft audit, which we just received, and our profit and loss statements. So this is a number we're pretty comfortable with. Tax revenues coming in at just a little below 1.6 million. And then our operating revenue, that includes patient fees, which we are budgeting at the same level as the current year. That's 1.7 million for patient fees. We also are anticipating a $125,000 grant from Peace Health System for our MIH program. It'll be $125,000 a year for 2 years, so a total of $250,000. That has not been finalized yet, has not been announced by Peace Health, so we're crossing our fingers. I'm confident we're going to get that, but that's not official yet. And that also includes our annual payment from the casino for fire and EMS protection. So this gives us a total revenue and fund balance, $5,819,220. And that's all I was going to do for revenue, John.
Okay, Jody, do you have any questions on the revenue side for the chief?
Nope, I don't. Thank you. That was very well put together.
Joel?
I have a question. With the pandemic, people are out of work. Has the district, I know the district is in revenue shortfalls as well, but has the district thought about lowering their tax levy, tax millage?
Joel, we have not talked about that at all. I'd be very reluctant to recommend a decrease in revenue at this point. But that's not something that has been discussed that I know of.
RJ?
I don't have anything on the revenue.
Rick?
No, I'm really comfortable with the revenue. I think that, as the chief said, the patient fees this year are going to be higher than what we budgeted, but with the virus and everything, I think it's appropriate to be conservative on the patient fees. We just don't know where that's going to end up, and it's pretty similar this year. I'm pretty comfortable with it.
Larry?
Well, I'd like to be optimistic about revenue. but it's hard to see how we're going to realize the same level of revenues either from patient fees or collected tax funds when 1 in 4 people are out of work. And it's also hard to see how our patient revenue will be the same if we don't have tourism in Florence this year. If we don't have the dunes open, if we don't have people needing the assistance of our paramedics, I think we will see a shortfall. I mean, we typically have many events during the year in Florence to bring tourism and people to the coast, and most of those events have been canceled. So I predict that we're going to see a shortfall in revenues, either a combination of tax collected or patient service fees. It will take us a while to see that, but I think it will happen.
Director Yesney, thank you, Director Farnsworth. Director Yesney is waving his hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment that the tax revenue, we're actually on the accrual method, so our revenue is what we bill and not what we collect. So if collections are down, that means the cash collected might be down, but we still bill, we actually record as revenue what we actually bill. It means accounts receivable would go up and cash would be down. But
I totally concur with that. I just think we will see a fiscal impact. Whether it's cash or accrual, we'll eventually see an impact of less cash, if you want to put it that way.
thank you.
Okay. Cindy,
I have no questions.
Mike,
I'm good with the numbers.
okay. The expenditure summary is pretty self-explanatory in that little blurb, but we will look at them more in depth as we go through the next sections.
John?
Yes.
John, before we leave the section, I have one more question I just remembered.
Okay.
On the proposal, the district is proposing freezing wages.
And we'll talk about that in more detail coming up.
Okay, I just have a quick question, and then
Sure.
I'm sure you're going to talk about that as far as personnel.
Yeah, we are, Joel.
Can I ask a question about beginning fund balance?
Sure.
Wait, I'm not done my question yet.
Okay.
Has the district, board member Farnsworth mentioned the collections are going to be maybe 1/4 off of what maybe the projections are. Has the district thought about, instead of freezing wages, cutting them?
Joel, we're in the midst of negotiations right now with the union. And, you know, we can't make any true determination on the freeze, a reduction, or an increase of wages until we get done with the union negotiations.
But is that on the table for the union negotiation?
We cannot discuss that because we are in negotiations. And we can't discuss what us or the union has on the table till it is settled.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about the beginning fund balance?
Go ahead, sir.
My question would be, the beginning fund balance changed quite a bit in the last day or two. Could Director Yesney help us understand the changes? And have we done the set aside from last fiscal year for the PERS account, for the PERS set aside? And where are those funds? Is that part of the beginning fund balance, or is it set aside in a separate account?
Yeah, I can address the beginning fund balance. We took the March financial statements that we have, and the fund balance at the end of March in the general fund is almost 2.6 million. April, as it turned out, was almost a break-even month, and we'll lose money in May and June. So, you know, we're at 2.6, but we'll lose money for 2 more months. And so it was a, you know, conservative estimate and an estimate. That's why it's rounded to 2.1. but that should be a pretty good number. There's no major expenses that I know of that are coming up, like the PSAP or anything like that. Those are already paid. And I think Dina, I don't know if you want to address why the discrepancy in the number
Right.
from where we started.
When I worked with Kathy Taylor, she told me a good way to project beginning fund balance was to take the auditor's ending fund balance from June 30 of the prior fiscal year and adjust that to this year's budget, and that would be your beginning fund balance. So with the delay of the Western Lane audit, that gave me a preliminary number that wasn't necessarily correct. And once we just received the draft audit this week. So numbers changed and we consulted with Director Yesney and came up with this new number.
Okay, so the beginning fund balance, is that the same as saying the beginning cash balance?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, actually not quite.
Okay.
It's cash plus accounts receivable minus accounts payable and payroll payable liabilities.
Okay.
So it's asset minus liability general fund.
I understand. So does that cash balance include the funds that we have set aside for PERS and also for capital replacement?
It would include PERS. I'm going to take an answer on this, and Chief and Dina, if you want to tell me I'm wrong, that's okay. It would include the $150,000 in PERS that's not been set aside, but it doesn't include the reserves for capital or what's in LifeMed. Either of those. Neither of those are included.
That is correct.
Okay, so our capital funds would be separate from that number.
Yes.
Our LifeMed number funds would be separate from that number.
Yes.
And our PERS set aside amount should be separate from that number.
We are working on getting that separate. Yes.
Okay, so it currently hasn't been sequestered out of there.
That's a Dina question.
Yeah, the 150 is still in that number, and we are building a new account to set aside for PERS, which will be later addressed in the presentation.
Okay, so really the number should be 150 less than that number, because that set aside could have happened months ago, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, where would it go though? It would be reserved in the general fund at this point. There isn't a separate fund set up to transfer that to.
That's what Dina is talking about, I think, is having a separate account for that.
Right. Right now, it's in the 2.1 million, and we are going to this year bring it out of there and have it in its own account if the board decides to do that.
I see. Okay.
And that will be done in the 2020-21 budget document, not the 2019-2020 document.
Yes.
Well, we had budgeted last year for this period we're in now.
Right. There's 150,000 for this current fiscal year that's been budgeted.
How much, Chief?
150,000.
Right. Correct.
Okay, let's move. I have one question, Dina, on the contingency you're showing here, the 350,000. On the balance sheet, we currently show $387,449. Does that mean we are spending down the contingency on the balance sheet $37,449,000 before the end of the budget cycle?
Well, we started contingency this year with 500,000, which 150,000 was set aside for PERS. So you actually had 350,000 in contingency. During the fiscal year, several months ago, we had to make an appropriations transfer, and I don't have that right in front of me, but we did have to transfer some money out of contingency into, I believe, personnel services for some reasons. The board, do you remember that appropriation transfer resolution we did? I think it was in December or November.
I don't remember.
Well, if you want to keep going, I'll pull it out and
But what I'm asking, the balance statement for the end of March that we have shows 387,449 in contingency. That's in our budget document.
right. Hold on. So we started with 500 and resolution 2020-01, which was done in January. We transferred $112,551 out of contingency. 92,000 went to personnel services for the 6% PERS pickup amount that did not get budgeted this year. And 19,000 went to materials and services to pay for a ground emergency medical transport fee because we applied for that program and we had to put up $19,000.
Okay, did any of that happen after March of 2020?
No, that was in January at your January board meeting.
So then my question is, you must anticipate between now and the end of July of spending $37,449 out of contingency because you only have $350,000 budgeted.
Well, we had 500,000 budgeted with 150 set aside for PERS. So with the amount, with the 387 that's left, 387, 449 minus 150,000, you have $237,449 left in contingency if needed between now and June 30.
Okay, thanks. Okay, let's move on to personnel services page.
Just one quick thing. I just want to explain those other documents that you'll find in your budget package. There's two table 4As. And table 4As are given out by the Lane County, and that just indicates the assessed valuation of the district and the taxes imposed for the current fiscal year. We won't get the new table 4As for the next fiscal year until October. You have two table 4As. One is for the permanent levy, and then one is for the local option levy. So to show different amounts, and that's our tax revenue. We've also included, and this is what John's been referring to, we've got the fiscal year 20 budget versus actuals through March, if anybody wants to review that. Okay. So personnel services, this is in tab 3. So we start looking at our expenses. Again, it's not my intention to go line by line, but certainly if you have a question on any of the lines, we're more than happy to answer those. So the wages that we are showing represents a wage freeze. In health benefits, again, like we've said, this is dependent, a lot of this is dependent on negotiations. But we are budgeting for making the move to a higher deductible plan. And with PERS, there's two lines here. The first line representing what the district must pay. Currently, that's 23.96% of wages for our Tier 1 and Tier 2 PERS members. And then we pay 18.33% of wages for our OPSERP members. And then there's an additional 6%, that's the PERS PU, that is currently paid by the district, but is optional in that it can be either employer paid or employee paid. And our proposed budget represents moving that to employee paid. So again, I have to emphasize that much of the decreases we're seeing in the proposed budget will result in a decrease in take-home pay for our people as compared to today. So it's nothing that we're taking lightly. But that gives us a total for personnel services of $2,127,928. So ready for questions on personnel services. And I think, Joel, this may be where
Yeah,
your
well,
question comes in.
let me ask a question about that. That's budget 2 proposed, but you do have a proposal for budget 1. So,
We've taken that was an unsustainable budget. So I would just focus on the budget that has these numbers. That's the budget we're proposing. And I'm sorry about that. You have an earlier version. That's my fault for that.
okay, so you're proposing the budget 2. So in that budget 2, you are cutting wages and benefits.
Well, it looks that way. What we did is we've taken
That's the freeze that you're talking about, right?
Well, there's a wage freeze, but we've taken some people out. So it shows a decrease in total cost. We've moved them to the fire authority. So the fire authority is paying salaries of those people that used to be paid in Western Lane. So we are talking a wage freeze. It's not a wage decrease. The amount has decreased just because we're paying fewer people. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. And this budget is presupposed on the consistent collection of taxes and fees and so forth that you've had in the past.
Of course, yes.
But you probably won't have that now.
Well, when you look at our transport fees, mostly is Medicare and Medicaid. So I'm assuming that the U.S. government will continue making those payments. I know it's a big assumption, but we feel that would continue. The impact you may have would be on the private pays, the people that pay out of pocket, and that's less than 10% of our revenue. So I don't think we may see an impact. We probably will see an impact on revenue, but it is hard to predict. And then tax revenue, again, it's hard to predict, but I think the tax imposed will remain with the 3% increase. It's just the ability of people to pay taxes. That I can't predict.
Jody, do you have any questions?
I just have one question. Switching the PERS pickup of 6% to the employees, but that's not coming with a wage increase, correct? So that would be, okay. So that would potentially be a decrease in salary at 6%, correct?
Yeah, so take-home pay would absolutely be decreased.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay. That's my only question. Thank you.
RJ?
Yeah, I was looking at the numbers here, and I'm a little puzzled with the supervisors. I took a look at the supervisor FTE along with their overtime, and that works out to where we're paying the supervisors $122,585 a year each. And that is $9,496 less than we budgeted for the chief's salary last year, and $24,823 more than Matt's salary that was budgeted last year. You know, for supervising 3 people, I think that's a bit excessive when you consider the paramedics are making we're budgeting $86,850 each for the paramedics, and the supervisors are making $35,700 more a year than the paramedic, and the only thing they're doing is supervising 3 people. I think that is just completely out of the ballpark.
Well, there are 3 supervisors supervising the 12 FTEs. Is that what you
Right.
mean?
Yeah, so on a shift, we have 5 to 6, so it'd be a little bit more that they're supervising that. And our supervisor are our most senior people, so they're at the high end of the salary range. They're our most experienced people, they've already reached their top end. So that explains some of why they're at that high level. Not all of it, but some.
I honestly, I think we should get rid of that supervisor role and make it a lead. Give them $1 more an hour to be the supervisor, to be the lead. I can't see spending that kind of money when they're supervising so few people. I mean, if they are truly managers, then we need to take them out of the role that they are, make them managers, put them on salary, and have them do a manager's role. That's my thoughts.
Thank you, RJ. And what you're saying to be done is a policy decision to be made at the board and management level, but we will put it on an agenda and we will discuss it. Thank you. Rick Yesney.
I didn't really have any questions on this part. It does, I actually had a kind of a question for Jody O'Mara. Jody, I don't want to put you too much on the hot seat. You don't have to answer, but our budget last year, the benefits, taxes and benefits were over 50% of what the salaries are, and the proposed budget is still about 41% burden to payroll. And I guess overall, just a general comment, we're in a position where if our revenues are pretty much capped at going up about 3% a year, but our payroll and our benefits in particular go up 5 or 6%, and it's 75% of our budget is payroll. I think that's the same thing the schools have chased too, and so I just want to explain that at some point it becomes untenable. It just becomes a broken system that you can't fund. So we have to find some way to balance the budget each year, and I think this is a good start on trying to get that done. And Jody, I was just asking you, how do you balance the school? Because I think you're even heavier on personnel. You're probably 85, 90%, and have the same issue around benefits. So do you have any magic thoughts for us on how you balance this every year?
Wow, I wish I could. I could be a millionaire if I could tell people how to balance their budget. I'd charge everybody money to learn. It is, our budget's about 85%, maybe 88% personnel, and that's where most of our money goes towards. We're lucky in that our funding isn't totally relied on the taxes as well as and I can't see it because it's not on the screen, but the transportation and transporting, and then the reimbursement from that. We have other revenue streams that help support the schools. This year's going to hurt worse probably than it has in a long time because of the economy. I wish I had a magic 8-ball to give you a better answer, Rick, but we're starting our budget process. Our first budget meeting's next Wednesday. So
okay, thanks, Jody. Appreciate the input.
I know a lot of districts right now, to balance it, they're looking at furlough days, which is not an option for paramedics or fire.
Right. Thank you.
Larry.
Well, as I look at the budget, the part that perplexes me the most is our personnel expenses. And I share the view that somehow in the past, we got upside down with the compensation levels in this district. And I really believe they're unsustainable. Part of the reason that we have a problem is because of how we're scheduling work, for no other reason than the preference of our employees. We have a 48-96 shift, which results in the payment of overtime. We have what's called required overtime in our work schedule, and then we have optional overtime. And so what happens is our employees who come to work and work 2 full days in a week get 8 hours of overtime that first 2 days, and then they come back after their 96 hours off and get another full day of overtime. And that's a very high cost to the district. And it's largely unsustainable because no normal business would build a business model around overtime. Overtime should be exceptional circumstances, unplanned events, cataclysmic events, that sort of thing. We shouldn't be building a business model, whether we're private or government, that loads the equation with a multiplier that pays overtime at the rate we're doing. We already pay really great wages in this district. On average, our wages are 30% higher than competing services. And we multiply that effect by paying overtime according to a shift that we could change that would minimize overtime in our business model. Aside from that, we have optional overtime. And last year, the district had 7,418 hours of overtime that was used to backfill for vacation, sick leave, training, bereavement, military training. That's a cost of $282,431. And so I believe our model of doing business has been broken for a long time, and we're not being prudent managers unless we put in place a reasonable staffing model that doesn't use overtime except in unusual circumstances. So I share the view that even despite our efforts with these changes that we're making, this business model is still broken. And I don't believe it's sustainable. I think that we need to get back to basics as a district, and we're sorry that these things happened in the past. They're unfortunate, but you can't have paramedics making $90,000 a year, and you can't have supervisors making $123,000 a year. When you look at the scope of responsibility for managers and supervisors, you won't find anybody making that kind of money who doesn't have the right to hire or fire or make capital decisions. That's more money than the physician assistants make in our community. So we have got an out of control personnel model in this district. And until we fix that, we're still going to have a crater in the ground to fill.
Thank you, Larry. And that's some conversations we need to have at the board level. Cindy, any questions on the personnel page?
No, I don't have any.
Mike Webb?
No, I'm all right with it. I think it's being pretty conservative budgeting, basically the wages and hanging on to this level, but that's the best try we can make. That's
Chief,
it.
Chief, is there anything you want to add to that section?
I do. I wanted to talk about PERS, and this could be a really long discussion or it could be really short. That's up to the committee.
Well, I personally believe you just to give us.
Well, I'll give you what I'm going to talk about, and then we can.
Sure.
So we're proposing to place.
Change a lot of it.
Yeah, we're proposing to place $300,000 a year in a district-controlled fund, and this was done to address our unfunded liability. Currently, it sits at well, it's 2.8 million. And we've set aside 100, or we're going to set aside 150,000. But Rick and I had talked at length about this, and he actually called our LCOG expert on PERS and talked to her. So really, we don't know is there a timeline for reducing our unfunded liability? This money we're putting aside, I mean, are we going to get a bill from PERS someday saying you owe $2.8 million? And I don't think that's what's going to happen. So the question is, do we put this money aside? For what purpose are we putting it aside? If we're putting it aside to participate in the state match program, that's possibly a use for it. I don't see that happening for a few more years. But the question, and Rick, go ahead and pitch in. We had this discussion yesterday, but it's, do we need to put $300,000 a year into a district-controlled fund to address our unfunded liability?
Yeah, this could turn into a real lengthy discussion. I think the board needs to have a separate discussion on this, because my understanding again is that PERS calculates based on actuarial tables and how funds have performed every 2 years, what your contributions are going to have to be on an annual basis. And those are what they call collared. They have a floor and a ceiling. You can't really prepay your unfunded liability. You can just set aside money to pay whatever the state calculations turn out to be every 2 years. You can pay into a side account in PERS, and I do believe they then reduce your rate because they count that like paying your unfunded liability. But if you hold it yourself, you're not going to get a reduction in any kind of there's going to be no change to the district on what you pay on an annual basis. But I think it's very complicated. I think we need some clarity around what we're trying to achieve by setting this money aside. And if we set it aside in a fund, what are we going to use it for? I'm not sure what we're going to do with it. If you don't put it in the PERS, into PERS itself, in a PERS side account, it's basically going to sit there, and I guess we could have a separate type of investment fund, maybe invest for the long term and maybe have put possibly over time higher earnings to help pay our PERS account. But I would recommend that we put this into our strategic planning as part of our planning, and have a further discussion with the PERS expert on what our philosophy should be on what we do with the unfunded liability.
May I comment?
Of course.
You know, the state has created a big problem for us because the benefits that were given over time were too generous for the amount that the state was billing districts. And that's the first problem. The second problem was that the state decided to underbill districts for the annual contribution necessary to meet those actuarial obligations. And so what the state forecasts is ever increasing, steep increases in the amount that we'll have to fund to the state to make up that difference. And according to the best information I received, this problem goes out to 2047 in the state of Oregon. It's such a big problem. It was on the front page of the New York Times as one of the biggest failures in terms of pension management in the United States. It was on the front page of the New York Times. Well, the reason that the state set the set-aside account was so that we would have an investment vehicle that could earn some money that would help us dilute the effect of those rapid increases that we're going to face. And I know that the set-aside bonus of 25% probably will never happen. I think Mike previously suggested that we do have this side account and we do put it in investment type vehicles because we seriously need to set aside the money to pay this bill when it comes due. And Rick is right. We have not been able, we've not been asked to pay it now, but we do owe this money. And so if you think about it, 2.8 million is more than an unfunded liability. It's a debt owed by this district. And for us not to set aside some money each year, I think would be really negligent, because when those increases come up in the future, as they have for some school districts, we're going to end up laying people off or making cuts. And it would be better if we were using advanced planning to set aside for that day when we have to pay our bills. Just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Larry. Chief, do you have any more on the PERS?
No, it's just that, we've put 300,000 into in our budget for this PERS account. I just wanted everybody to make sure they were aware of that.
Sorry, you'll need to set up an application.
Let's move on to materials and services summary.
Okay,
Real quick.
this is tab 4. I just wanted to point out that this is where we're paying for the authority costs. So in operations, under material services, that's training and supplies and vehicles and facilities. Administration, that's the IT, board of director costs, professional services, like attorneys, and then we have the WELFIA amount. Now, this WELFIA amount is what would be Western Lane's share of the total WELFIA cost, and I have a WELFIA budget coming up, and it represents what was approved by the SVFR board. So we'll have to discuss that further when we come up to the WELFIA budget.
Jody, do you have questions so far on that?
The only question I have is the difference in technology from what was adopted last year down to 2,200 this year.
Yeah, we moved those costs to the authority, and Dina, go ahead and pitch in, but we've just moved those costs, so those will be seen in the authority.
You will see a higher cost in the authority for IT services because we went out, we did an RFP this year for a new IT service provider, and we hired a company out of Eugene who is more expensive, but they are much more thorough, very professional. And so the WELFIA is taking on 100% of the IT services cost for all 3 entities. So it's being removed. The cost for IT services has been taken out of Western Lane Ambulance and Sayusal Valley Fire and is being split. Well, it's being paid by them, but through the authority. Does that help?
Yes. And then just the difference in professional services from 79,000 to 95,000 this year. What does that, I look down below and I can kind of see what it is, but.
Mostly attorney fees, I think.
Right, so the breakdown is in the 3rd page in tab 4. You've got your administrative, the materials and services breakdown. So 95,000 is under professional services. And a big chunk of that is the billing service for the Western Lane Ambulance. We have a 3rd party who does all of our transport fee billing.
And then the GEMT admin fee is added into that too? That's new this year? What is that? Just curious.
That's the ground emergency
Medical transfer. That's an additional, so we make just a percentage of what we bill on our Medicaid calls. We don't get 100%. So this is funds from the government to help us with that. There is a state match requirement to get those funds. We have to pay that state match because the state won't do it. So we ended up netting about $50,000. So our payment was $70,000 total, but we had to pay $20,000 to get that.
Okay. Those are the only questions I have. Thanks.
Joel?
I had a question on WELFIA, but it was answered during the discussion here. So thank you.
RJ?
There's several items, on the breakout that are quite a bit, or budgeting quite a bit more than, what's being used this year. And I was wondering why we weren't narrowing those up more.
Do you have a specific example we can look at, RJ?
Well, if on page 21, staff training and conference, 30,000. So far, we've used $4,984. Education reimbursement, 8,000. We've used $1,700. PMEMT certification, we've used $1,500 so far this year, and we're budgeting $5,000. Target solutions safety training, we didn't use anything this year, and there's thousands of dollars there.
Some of those are annual payments, so you will see some activity there. But yeah, I think we just took what we had budgeted the previous year and moved it over. I mean, that's,
But if you take a look at equipment repair towards the bottom of that page, 2017-18 was $2,600. 18-19 is $1,400. Then we budgeted 5,000 last year, and we've done 18. So if you kind of go straight across, why isn't that 3,000 instead of 5,000? Why aren't we using, you know, taking a look at our years past and do a little bit more extrapolating and get some of these numbers down? Or are we just trying to pad it to where if something goes wrong, we've got money? It's not a great way of budgeting as far as I'm concerned.
yeah, I'm a big fan of being accurate in our budgeting as much as possible. And then, yeah, so you do have to budget for emergencies in some areas, but I agree with you. It should reflect what we anticipate, you know, our costs are going to be.
I'd also like to mention that the actual numbers for fiscal year 17 and 18 there were some issues. I've only been employed here for 2 years, and when I came on board, we had to hire a financial consultant to help clean up the books. So some of these numbers from a few years ago are not necessarily exactly correct, but they're the numbers we have. And so we have been working very hard to get into more of a straight pattern of getting these numbers more consistent and providing better financials for the board.
On workers' compensation, I noticed that we've paid $1,651. And I know workman's comp can be very, very expensive. How are we coming up with the 37? Is that a premium, or where is that coming from?
Where are you?
I'm on page 23, workman's compensation, bottom of the page.
Can you tell me what tab you're on? I don't have the same page numbers you have.
Last page in tab 4.
Doesn't say I have a tab on.
Last page in tab 4.
So under workers' comp, the 37,000?
Yes.
And your question was again?
On your quarterly financials, you show that we've spent $1,600 and $1,651, and I thought that was rather low, that comp would be that low, but I was wondering why we have the 37,000 there. Is that?
I'll have to check to make sure I know exactly when, because I know that like property and casualty is on I think calendar year, and workers' comp is on a fiscal year. So we may be paying a little bit more coming up here soon. I'd have to look into that.
That kind of rolls into another question I have generally on the financials. Why are the financials straight line? Why are they not spread out over the year as actual expenses come?
I don't understand your question.
We know that historically you have more expenses during the summer than you have in the winter. Yet all you will show is, this is how much we spent, this is the budget, and this is a percentage of it. But that doesn't give you the picture of, okay, if it's March of this year, where were we March of last year and the March before that, what percentage was it then of that total amount?
Well, I understand what you're saying, and I can prepare any type of report I can customize reports out of QuickBooks. If I would have known that this is something you wanted to see, I would have happily provided it. But this is the standard report I provide for the board. But I can more than happy provide any report that anybody wants to see.
Okay.
Okay, Rick. I do say I do share some of RJ's questions about just in general, some of like staff training we haven't used in the past. And some of those areas, if we could average them out or give a reason for their proposed level. I was curious about WLAD as well. Was that moved to dues? I'm assuming that we're not pulling out a WLAD, which is on page 22, close to the bottom. It's there's no budget line items for those.
Yeah, no, we moved that to dues, the 5,700.
That's
And
what I
then
thought.
the disaster supplies we're just not using, so I took that out of the budget.
Okay. And I do wonder if we couldn't tighten up this area, and maybe if we have a we have a pretty significant contingency, if we ran into issues, we could move some expenses out of contingency if we had to. I know repairs are hard to figure and things like that.
And emergency services is pretty fixed. Medical supplies are pretty fixed as well. Training, we do a lot of in-house training, so it saves us money. We're very fortunate to be able to offer that. We've budgeted that we may not be able to continue to do that. That can certainly be debated if that's the right way to go. And then equipment, facilities and equipment, that's really a guess.
Yeah. Okay, that was really my main question was about WLAD. I just want to make sure we're still kind of a lead agency in that, I'm sure. And
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We're still involved.
Yep.
Larry?
Yes, I was wondering, I am not seeing the WFIA budget.
It's at the end.
Okay.
Very end. Oh, you mean the actual entire budget will be later on. This is just the one line.
Okay, is this the 507-556
Yes.
Okay. Well, maybe I have something different because I don't see it.
It's line 28 on the very last page.
Line 28 on the very last page. Well, my last page is 31 and line 28 is workers' comp. So I may not have what you have.
Are you in tab 4?
In my document, Larry, via budget.
It's right underneath workers' comp. 2 lines underneath workers' comp. Oh, I wonder if it got cut off.
Well, what I'm concerned about is I don't see any itemization of the 507-556. I don't have that chart. So I don't know what the 507-556 is for.
Are you in onboard or are you looking at the PDF?
I'm in onboard.
And if you go to the bottom, WFIA, there's an attachment in there?
Looking at what's interesting is there's 2 budgets still on my package, WFIA budget number 1 and WFIA budget number 2.
Correct.
Okay, so I don't see anything that adds up to 507-556.
So it would be budget 1.
Okay, budget 1 that I have has fire and EMS chief, fire ops chief, training chief, EMS ops chief, office manager. That comes down to total personnel services of $895,208, right?
Yeah, we'll be discussing the WFIA budget at the end there.
Yeah, but we still have to approve this line item. This is a big number without any detail. I'm trying to figure out what we're paying for.
Then we're going to have to skip ahead, I guess.
Skip ahead.
Well,
So,
if you want.
Larry, sorry, this is Jody. I have a question. Are you looking at the revenue summary transfer from WLAD
No,
at 507?
no, no. I'm looking at the screen share right now. We've got operations, administration, and WFIA for 507-556.
Larry, do you have the first page of the WLFIA? It's kind of a budget summary page. It's got the revenue and then it's got a summary of expenses. It's before the detail on personnel.
Okay, I have the,
And it shows total revenue and budget one of 995,208.
I do see that. I see 995,208, which is a
And
summary.
right above that, yeah, WLAD is 51% of that, which is the 507,556. Can you see, do you have that?
I do. What I want to know is, how did we get to 507,556?
So we have personnel services and materials and services, also expenses that add up to 995,208, and then we have 51% of that number.
Okay. So where is that schedule for the 995?
That's in tab
Go
8.
ahead.
Tab 8 is all about Wilfia.
Okay, well, my tab 8 is covered by the page numbers in onboard, so it makes it difficult. So if I look at the WFIA personnel expenses, it shows 895,208, and then budget number 2, 792,788.
Right. And the next page breaks down if you go to the next page, that provides the detail for the 895,208.
Okay, so it's the 895,208 plus an even 100,000.
Correct.
For materials and services, Larry, the 100,000 is.
I got you. So we take those two numbers, then we plug it in above. So the detail I'm looking for is up here above. It's all these other things here. I was trying to figure out where the 507 came from.
Well, it's 51% of the entire WFIA budget.
Right. Okay. So in our WFIA budget, we have the fire chief, the ops training chief, which we haven't filled, the EMS ops chief, the office manager, the admins, the CSTs, total wages, and then we have the health and benefits on that level. Okay. So there's two budgets there. There's budget number 1 and there's budget number 2. There's $100,000 between those two budgets.
SVFR approved budget 1 in their deliberations. So that's the number we're showing. If Western Lane does not want to approve that, then the boards would have to get together and decide what the funding is going to be.
I have a question on the fire ops chief, training chief.
Yes.
So are you saying that we're definitely going to be getting that position filled, or is that just in case we decide Matt can't do both positions, or
It's a little bit of, it's all of that, Cindy. We have no plans to fill it immediately. We wait and see. Well, first of all, see if it's approved. Yeah, if in the event that we decided to hire a fire ops chief, I think then we would use the funds for that. It's possible that we could hire somebody with operations and training experience to fulfill both obligations, but that's really, yeah, it depends on whether we need that second ops chief, and if we don't, then we would talk about, do we want to bring in a training chief?
Because Western Lane already has a training person and we're not paying anything extra for it. So now we're going to be expected to pay $50,000 to pay for something we already have. And then we'll have to replace that person.
We are paying that person 10%, which certainly doesn't cover what we would want to pay into a training position. But it would take those duties with the thought that it could even be that person for Western Lane right now.
But if you take that person from Western Lane, then I have to pay we have to pay 50,000 plus we have to replace that person.
Correct.
When we're getting it done for what he's getting paid now, period. It's not an additional salary we're paying him to do the training for our district.
That's correct.
So I don't agree with that.
No, I have a look.
Would you agree to leaving it in case we have to replace the operations chief?
I have a question on a comment you made, Chief.
Sure.
You said that Siuslaw Valley and Rescue approved this budget number 1 for WFIA. Has the WFIA board met and had a budget committee meeting?
Well, that's a good question. Do they have a budget committee? their budget comes from expenditures approved by SVFR and Western Lane. So
I'm lining up with John here. I think that
I'm not sure, but I would like a legal opinion. I think WFIA has to have a budget committee because they are a district, but I'm not sure, Chief, but.
Yeah, they're not a district, they're an authority, which is, I know it, but we had that issue before. It is different, but anything they came up with would have to be approved by the entire boards. They have no authority to set their budget.
And why do we have a board?
So it's a difficult question, John. I don't know for exactly, but I believe that since they have no authority to set a budget, what would a budget committee do?
I'm just asking the question. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either.
Okay. So we got kind of ahead of ourselves here. We are going to finish the WFIA budget. And I'm going to go to Jody. Do you have any questions?
No, not at this time. I don't.
Joel, you got any questions on the
Are you on tab 8 or are you still on 4?
I don't know, Joel. That's a good question. I think we're on tab 4 still.
I guess I wasn't clear on the line items on the WFIA budget. I heard some of it, but I'm keep looking through my budget here, and I guess I'm not as sure as some others are on what is included there.
Are you looking in tab 8, Joel?
Well, I've got 8 in front of me and I got 4 in front of me.
Okay.
4 doesn't give it. So 8.
Let's go to tab 8 under WFIA Personnel Services, please.
Okay.
Top of the page shows fire and EMS chief. We're looking at budget 1. That there is the 895,208 is the total personnel services for WFIA. And then on the next page, we have the materials and service summary that shows us the total expenses are $100,000 for the total of $995,208, and Western Lane Ambulance pays 51% of that. Questions? Jody.
Yeah, I see that.
No, I understand all that you just said, John. I do have a question, and maybe this is a question for Cindy, because I wasn't quite understanding the conversation between her and Chief Schick about the fire ops chief.
Okay, so with SVFR, we lost our training officer this year. And so instead of replacing them, we had the discussion, could we share a training officer between the 2 districts? So the 2 districts, instead of paying for 2 training officers, they would pay for 1 and pay half of that cost. So and that person, if we did hire a training chief, would go into the authority. All our admin positions go into the authority. We also lost our fire operations chief this year. He resigned. So we have essentially 2 openings on the SVFR side. And we moved Matt. He was the EMS operations chief for Western Lane. We moved him into operations chief for both agencies, SVFR and for Western Lane. So where we had 2 people before doing operations, 1 for each agency, we're trying the 1. It's a lot of work. Matt's doing a fantastic job. We just don't want to burn him out. So the question was, do we have to replace the fire operations chief? So that's what that line would be in WFIA, either a fire ops chief, or as we have talked about in the past, do we want to share a training chief?
Is it something that could be combined into one position instead of two? Because I understand it's like a placeholder in
Yes.
case you need to hire that.
Absolutely. We could have an operations chief with training oversight. Absolutely.
And Jody, to tag on to that, the Western Lane Board approved a temporary trial period, was it of 6 months, Chief?
Yes.
That we voted and approved a trial period of 6 months, and then we will determine if we will stay as structured or split it back up, and we keep Matt full-time at the ambulance, and the fire department hire their own ops chief, Jody.
Okay, thank you.
But if the fire department did hire their own ops chief, then Western Lane would be paying half of that through Welfia, as we normally do. So just make that clear.
Joel, any questions?
No.
RJ?
Honestly, I'd like to see the balance sheet for this part of it, so we could actually see what is expended against the last adopted budget, so we can take a look at the new budget. Also on the PERS employer, what's the PERS PU underneath it, the 32,720? Is that the 6%?
Correct.
So if we are going to be asking our union employees to pick up the 6%, I think we should be asking all employees to pick up the 6%.
Yeah, and that's a great question. SVFR is not asking their employees to do that, or may not. That's all part of union negotiations. So which union do you apply to the benefits to Welfia? It may be totally different for each agency. And I don't have an answer for you on that one.
Well, what's fair for one has got to be fair for all.
Yeah, but fair for Western Lane or fair for SVFR?
I'm just saying, we're paying 51% of the tab. Fair is fair.
Good point.
Rick Yesney?
I kind of think I'm okay with approving this as a maximum amount, and as a matter of form, I really think the Wilfia board should probably meet and approve their budget before it gets proposed to the other two entities. Sorry I didn't think of that ahead of time, but just as a matter of practice, I think that would be the best way to handle this, is to have that board approve the budget before it comes to the two entities for the cost split.
But then the two entities could not approve it. Then what do you do?
Sure. Then I suppose we'd have to go back and rebudget.
Right. So we're doing the same thing. It's just, yeah. So if it's not approved by the two boards, entire boards, then either it would have to go to the Welfia board to hammer out the differences, or the entire.
Yeah, I would think you go back to the Wilfia board and see what you could do at that point. But I'm okay with approving for now as a maximum amount, but I think there's some discussion we may need to have on the Wilfia operation. I would also say, maybe to one of RJ's questions, that at one point we took the budget or our actual expenses for Wilfia through March and took 51% of the personnel costs and added to our personnel costs at Western Lane compared to the prior year, and it was actually slightly under the prior year. So I think there's been some good management done on wages, at least holding the line on costs, and felt pretty good that Wilfia was performing well from a cost standpoint.
Larry?
I have a couple of questions. Maybe Cindy and Mike could help with this, but do you folks recall what we paid Cindy and Linda at the ambulance district to provide those services in the business office?
My recall, Cindy wasn't very expensive. She was under 40,000 at the time that she was still employed at Western Lane only. Linda was getting up there. She was, I think, about 90,000 a year pre-PERS. So that was just her wage.
See, do you remember what we were paying Henry?
Just about 100, 106 maybe.
Okay. And then a question for Jody. Do these office manager admin salaries, are they comparable to what you're paying at the school district?
So define the admin and the position that they're going to be doing and that they would be doing, and then I can answer that.
Excuse me, folks, we are getting away from what a budget committee is designed to do a little bit here.
Well, what I'm concerned about is I realize that we're paying a lot of money to WFIA, and I think that concern is shared by other board members. And at any particular point in time, we have to look at the cost of substitution as a comparison. So, you know, it's awkward, very awkward to have the fire district setting a budget that Western Lane has to pay 51% of, and that probably could be redone in a better format, but we're still concerned about the fact that we're paying 51% of basically $1 million. What would it cost us to do that on our own? And, you know, we did have a lot of problems with personnel, which drove us towards the IGA and this budget. So I think it's a fair question to see if we're getting good value or if the cost of substitution is a direction we'd want to go in. And that's why I'm asking. I'm just looking for information.
Sure.
So I'd still like to know, maybe it's too difficult to compare job descriptions, but you know, admin is kind of a wide title for what could be accounts payable or accounts receivable, or it could be any kind of duties. It's really hard to compare when the title is just admin. But it would be good to know because this is a pretty expensive operation that we're paying for.
So I can tell you, my business manager, who's a 12-month employee, he's in his second year as my business manager, and his salary is between 55 and 58,000. And he's the business manager, HR, and payroll, accounts receivable, accounts payable. He does all that.
I see.
Well, the reason Linda was paid as well as she was is cost of living increases, and she was a long-term employee with the district. But bear in mind that the district at the time they were running it were doing less than 2,000 calls a year.
Mm-hmm.
Our administrative costs for a roughly 4,000 call a year district for just the ambulance would be significantly more than what it was at that time.
But she was also doing payroll and also accounts receivable, wasn't she? She was doing the billing for the.
She was doing the billing and that stuff, but the systems have outpaced what we could have done with the people that we had. They were outpacing them at that point in time.
Right. So the point is well made, Mike. We're paying for billing services separate from the business office staff. So the business office staff is doing everything except the billing to third-party payers.
We're trying to find efficient ways to do things, but we have more staff on hand as far as more employees in general. We have a busier district. We're not the same district, and I don't think you're comparing apples to apples within the two. I think that's my statement.
I'm going to stop this conversation and get on my soapbox a little bit. I have had a problem with the way Western Lane Ambulance has been doing business concerning the budget the last few years. Staffing and wages should be gone over. If the chief is going to recommend a raise for an employee, we should know that ahead of the budget document so we don't get surprises, and that can all be said and done before it's put in the budget. It is not the budget committee's place to determine staffing and salaries for our employees. And next year, we're going to change that. Okay?
Good.
Yep.
Okay, do we have any more questions on WFIA's budget? If not, we are going to go back to capital outlay and life med.
Is that tab 4 or 5?
Tabs 5 and
I
6.
I don't have tabs. I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
It should be on the first page of onboard. It should tell you what tabs.
Well, the tabs are covered up by page numbers.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
In the document that Dina emailed out to us in the email, the PDF file, I'm going to page 24. Operations capital outlay is the heading on the page. Chief, take over, please.
Thank you. So in tabs 5 and 6, we're looking at our proposed capital budget for next year. And I'll be going through, in the next slide, I'll show you just our long-term capital replacement plans. Again, each year it has to be approved by the board, but this is just what we're projecting. So our intent with this budget and future budget is to be able to transfer $120,000 from our general fund to our capital fund each year. We're going to be spending more than that, than $120,000 in most years. Some years we won't. But we want to start drawing down that capital fund we have. We have a pretty high capital fund, and with no other uses for that, I think we should start spending it on capital. For next year, so what I show here is our beginning capital fund balance, a little over $830,000. We do expect some interest, and then the transfer from the general fund of $120,000 would give us a balance of $961,000. And then for next year, we're planning on the outlays. The major capital would be computer upgrades for $5,000. The EKG monitors for $170,000, and then a video laryngoscope, and that represents one at $20,000. So we've been buying over the last couple of years. We've been trying to spread out the video laryngoscopes, and that's what we use for intubation. It helps us, we can see down somebody's throat with that. So we've been able to spread that out over a couple of years. It's very difficult to do that with the monitors, and this represents several monitors because the technology is so different in new monitors that it's easier to purchase them all in 1 year. So everybody's working with the same technology. And then this is our projected capital replacement needs. So we've looked at all these categories out throughout the year. On the bottom would be the ending fund balance of what we expect to remain in our cap. And you see we are drawing it down. And this is projecting our average need to be about $190,000 a year to purchase all these items. Now, all these items may not happen in a specific year. Look for an ambulance. Our ambulances may be doing great. They're in great shape. We don't need a replacement. So we put that replacement out a year or 2 years. And vice versa. If we have a need, we may have to pull it up. But we have a very generous capital fund that I think that we have a lot of room that we can make those kind of decisions. So you see in fiscal year 2021, we did add a district MIH card. I didn't show that in the previous slide because this is paid entirely by the grant from Peace Health. So this would take currently our MIH drives a district vehicle. We would move that back into district use. And then we'd probably be looking for a used vehicle, but get something for Wendy to use for MIH. So I was going to say a few things on LifeMed, but do you want to get questions on capital, John?
We'll take both questions at the same time. Go ahead with LifeMed, okay. Chief.
So we also have a description in tab 5 following the first part of capital on LifeMed, our LifeMed fund. There it is. So LifeMed is our ambulance subscription model. That covers out-of-pocket expenses. I believe it's $65 a year or somewhere around that. If you pay that, it's a year subscription, and then there won't be any out-of-pocket expenses. We still bill insurance companies for the transport, There's just no out-of-pocket expenses. And we're proposing transferring 163,000 from the Life Med Fund into our general fund. And then we've been working very hard this year on finding, so this covers some of our write-offs that we have in our transport revenues, and we collect about 30% of what we bill. So it's a very low amount. So this does cover some of the write-offs, and we also use Life Med funds for some of our supplies that we provide for our partner agencies. So there's a few different things. And we anticipate about 145,000 a year in revenue from Life Med, from the subscriptions. For many years, the fund was not used, and it had a pretty high balance. That's been drawn down the last couple of years to supplement the general fund. And with the 163,000, that would put it at zero. But then we would have additional Life Med funds every year coming in to replenish that. We want to keep it as a separate fund in that these are not taxpayer generated funds. These are not a result of tax revenue. So there's the thought that this would be a little bit more leeway on what we could use these funds for. So that's it for capital and Life Med, John.
Okay, any questions on that, Jody?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Joel?
No, I had one question for you, John. If the budget committee is not we're not setting policy on different things like personnel, but we certainly have an advisory role to give our opinion. We've got to do that.
In some cases, you are correct, Joel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have Dina send out a bulletin that is produced by special districts and or the state of Oregon, what a budget committee's responsibilities are. And then you and I'll have a conversation about it and be sure we're on the same page, Joel. I understand what you're saying totally. But it is not Joel and John Murphy's decisions to make as budget committee members what the pay scale and staffing levels are.
No, that's the board, but we have to have input.
If you want to have input on staffing levels and pay, you need to come to a board meeting, sign in, and speak to us as a board. And we'll probably always disagree, Joel, but I respect your opinion. And I've chaired a lot of budget committees, and we just have to stay on track for what our duties are. RJ?
In looking at the capital reserve funds, I noticed that the billing reserve account was discontinued. And that's why the account is flush. And personally, those are designated funds. They were set aside for an asset, and now we're turning them into a items that are going to be depreciated out and used. I personally feel that the monies in that account, if it's not going to go for the original intended purpose, that should go against the $2.3 million PERS debt that the district has. As far as projected capital replenishment needs, that needs to be coming out of the yearly operations. And we need to have a plan in place to be able to meet that. But to just, fiddle fart 769,000 down over 10 years. I don't think that was the intent of the fund, and I don't think that that's right. And that's probably not something that I should say on the budget committee, but there it is.
That's okay, RJ. Mike, do you want to address that at all?
Well, the reason we had the building reserve fund was to build a building. We no longer need to build a building. That need is gone away with the changes in the way that we're managing the district. So replacing our ambulance district didn't make sense. Having money set aside for some capital improvements, which could have been used for building or could be used for building in any way, shape, or form if we need to, made more sense. So the designation into a capital reserve rather than a building reserve freed that up so it didn't have to be used for a real estate asset, but could be. Now, my only question on the building reserve fund is, or the capital reserve fund is, at what level do we get to a point where we are comfortable that we're going to be okay with the cash in hand? And personally, I'm thinking 2 ambulances is what puts us at what, $400,000 or so. And so if we had a $500,000 bottom on that amount, that might be good to consider as a budget figure. I would like to see, and it's not on this year's budget, but I would like to see us consider borrowing monies for the capital improvements or for the assets, because they're something that will be used over time, and leveraging the money makes more sense. However, I lend it to ourselves out of our own capital fund so that we can continue to replenish that fund. I just am not quite sure what the bottom dollar amount needs to be. I'd ask the chief to project that out based upon what our capital needs are for the future.
Yeah, definitely you want to look at if you had to replace an ambulance without being planned. So you're talking 180,000 up to 200,000. So plus your other upgrades. I think, I agree. I think 500,000 is a good target to be at.
Thank you, Mike. Rick, do you have any questions?
I don't on capital replacement or LifeMed, and would comment that I really appreciate the projected capital replacement need sheets. We haven't had that much in the past, and I think that's really important. So thank you for providing that.
And Chief House did a lot of these numbers. I'll give him credit.
Larry?
My comments are that I don't know why we're budgeting less than the average need in the projected capital replacement. We're kind of spending down our inheritance, and I realize that we could spend down to 500,000, and it looks like we are. I mean, we're scheduled to go all the way down to 319, but the near-term slope is 120, 225, 196. 4 years out, 162, 231. It seems like if we're only budgeting 120,000, that doesn't seem prudent to me. I think we ought to at least keep our schedule current, because if we stayed with this kind of pattern, we're just like an HOA that doesn't set aside funds for future needs. We're going to run out of money if this model continues. Like if we get down to 500,000, and then we have a big event, well, then you have no money. In terms of the LifeMed account, is 53,000 all we have left in that LifeMed account?
We have 52,000 in there right now.
And that's all that's in there?
Yes, but we're about ready to start the campaign June 1st.
Okay. So our board hasn't had a decision about setting a new rate for LifeMed, right?
Correct. I think the goal was for the LifeMed analysis report that we created to see how that plays out.
Okay. So generally speaking, this spreadsheet is good, but it's important to note that we had funds that the chief referred to as not used. That really wasn't a correct statement. We used the money, we just never transferred the funds out of the LifeMed account. And on a year-to-year basis, the amount of money we collect in dues for LifeMed, we spend more than that in contractual allowance write-offs and these training events. And that's a board decision to decide how much of a loss we want to do each year. But this spreadsheet doesn't really show that loss. I think in the past we've been analyzing it's 20 or 30,000 a year, but it is a loss each year for good purposes. That's what I have.
Cindy,
I have no questions or comments.
Mike, any more comments or questions on your behalf?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Do we need to go over the capital reserve, or have we covered enough of that to suit you folks in this conversation?
I'm good with it.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to talk about PERS a little more, Chief, or?
Do we need to address Welfia at all anymore?
Well, we'll get to there after we do PERS and.
I don't have any more slides,
Okay.
so.
I have a question on PERS.
Sure, Joel.
I'm not sure from the last discussion whether the board puts money aside every year for PERS in a certain account. It sounds like they're not. What if the state comes back and says you owe $5 million and you've got to pay it?
I think that would be, probably wouldn't just be Western Lane, it would be multiple agencies in the state. I think you would see big trouble.
So you're going by the philosophy then, and is the board too, that the state will never collect that?
No, I'm going that we have no idea what the state will ask us for.
If I'm not mistaken, there's also some restrictions on how much they can increase the PERS per year. They can't go to a level to try to recapture the whole thing.
Well, and that reimbursement rate is set by the legislature. You know, they do a biennial analysis, and what the PERS agency forecasts is steep increases in the future.
We could just give them a couple of the old ambulances.
Works for me.
I do have a comment on the PERS line, and really didn't figure this out till today. So it's, again, it was late, but you'll notice in the budget for adopted for 2019-20 that the PERS UAL account is below the expenditures line. And the transfer to PERS is included in expenditures, but I don't think we're planning on spending that money. I think that's a set aside. It's not a use of resources. It's a reserve, and feel strongly that 300,000 should be moved down to the PERS UAL account, line number 30, because it's not we're not spending that money unless we're planning to send that to the site account with PERS.
I agree.
Is that something you want to do in this document, Rick?
Yeah, because I think it's material and it misstates. It doesn't misstate. It doesn't affect the total general fund budget, but it is not an expense, and it's $300,000.
Hey, Rick,
I think it's pretty material.
I got a question on that. If you move it to the PERS UAL account, is it restricted at that point in time? Can it be accessed in an emergency circumstance through a board resolution?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Do we show our unfunded liability on our balance sheet?
No.
I don't believe so. I'm not sure where you would show that.
No, we don't currently.
That's a debt we owe.
Yeah, there's two. Yeah, we can talk about that at length.
It shows on the audit.
Yeah, it is in the audit.
Right, but anyone looking at our balance sheet would get the wrong impression.
Okay. Jody, are you okay with what Rick is suggesting for this budget document?
Yes. What page you're on that you're talking about moving it to the different
So we're
line
on
30?
tab 2, right at the beginning, showing the summary.
Okay.
So on line 27, we have the 300,000 transferred to PERS unfunded liability account. Rick is saying move that under line 29. We're gonna move it to line 30.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I wasn't that far up in the document. Thank you for clarifying that. No, I completely understand that. My question would have been what Mike said about does that restrict it for use, or, and I think it just would take a board action to change it.
Exactly.
That would have been my only question. And it does then make it a little more apparent to anybody looking at the budget document and or community that the ending fund balance or carryover or whatever you want to, however you want to call it, does include that, but that it is earmarked for PERS UAL. So I think that's a good idea.
I just wanted to say that I think my intent of putting it where I did was that the intent is to take $300,000 out of the general fund and put it into a different account. So it was actually being expended out and removed from general fund. That's why I put it there.
And that was
Yeah,
good.
Dina, I would think that we'd have to create another fund then. I mean, we could do it as a transfer to a fund, but to an account, it's going to stay in the fund balance of the general fund.
Well, that's what we were doing with capital, and capital are just separate accounts too. So, and that was making things kind of confusing in prior budgets. And I think the intent was to get capital and PERS out of the general fund. But the board can decide whatever they want to do. I don't have a problem with it being moved if that's the right thing to do.
Joel, do you agree with Rick's assessment?
Well, I think that what Dina just said about, I guess she had instructions from the board before, but I think you have to have, instead of the general budget, I think you've got to have PERS and the capital budget separately. That's the way I would do it. That's the way I've always felt about that in the past. I'm not sure the board is sure about what they want to do with PERS. I'm a little concerned about it.
If you put it in a separate budget like the capital improvement isn't that then separate from the general fund budget, which is then separate? Well, I mean, it's part of the general fund budget, but do you still have the same leeway with it?
Yeah, it would take a board decision to move those funds.
RJ?
In which position would it be that we could keep track of it the best?
That's a good point. I think our problem in the past with the capital fund is that it was placed into the unappropriated ending fund balance, which caused a lot of confusion. So when we took that out, I think if we keep the PERS unfunded liability account separate and don't put it into the unappropriated ending fund balance, I think then we'll be able to track it much easier.
I agree with that.
Good question, Cindy. That was good.
RJ?
As far as the PERS question, I agree with that.
Larry?
That's why I asked the question at the beginning of the session whether or not the money from this year had been transferred yet, because I fully expect it would be in a separate account so that we can recognize those funds and preserve them for the purpose of shoring up this retirement plan. And it would have to be a really severe emergency in my mind to take those funds out of there, since we're trying to cover future liabilities that we owe today. And when we owe this bill, we're just trying to set aside the money for the day when the bill comes due. So I like the idea of what Dina did, showing it as an expense in the budget, because if we're going to do this every year, 300,000, we ought to show that as an expense in the budget as compared to revenue. But we also need to have a separate account where we maintain that money so that it doesn't get mixed up with other funds.
Cindy?
I like having it in a separate account because of, then you can know where it's, you don't have to keep doing the math when you look at the ending balance.
Mike?
Well, just a quick question. If we put it into the other account and we haven't had the state give us the match fund or the match plus 25%, we get an increase in our PERS allocation or requirement for a year. Are we going to tap the unfunded account to help pay that? Because essentially what PERS is going to do is they're just going to increase our rate to amortize the unfunded liability over time. And we're just trying to offset that increase by paying it into this account. We should, if we put it into this account, we should be able to use that to pay for some of the, or offset some of the increase in the future. Otherwise, we're just putting money into an account that's not going to be used.
Yeah, we'll have to make that decision next year. We're anticipating a 5% increase in PERS contribution. So I think that would be a good time to have that discussion, Mike.
Is your 5% budgeted in here already?
Not this next fiscal year, the next.
Okay, so I agree with Mike. It should be a working fund. The idea of the side account was that it would also have some kind of investment returns, and that would help us with that obligation. But
And it drops your rate.
right. So I think it's a hybrid approach, like Mike suggests.
Just a minute on your comment, Chief. I want to understand. If Western Ambulance District is in charge of our PERS money, and we don't send that to the state of Oregon for a side account, they are not going to lower our rate if we're in charge of that money.
That is correct.
Thank you. But we have it to use and help offset our PERS increase.
Right. To give you an example, the fire department put $300,000 into the side account. The state added $75,000, and then it reduced their rate by 2.85%.
But they don't have use of that money at all.
That money, that is correct. That money is gone.
So how did
it's never used to pay down the PERS account?
I'm sorry, say again, John?
It is never used to pay off the unfunded liability. It is only used to reduce PERS rate.
Yeah, and I don't understand how it works, but they consider it an increase in assets for whatever reason. But yeah, our unfunded liability doesn't go away.
So Chief, just point of clarification, did the fire district actually get matching funds?
Yes, 75,000.
And did the fire, what happened with the ambulance district?
Well, there were two application periods. Western Lane wasn't eligible for the first one, and there's various reasons for. The fire department was, and there were a lot of funds left over. But for whatever reason, you had to get your application in within just a couple hours of the opening time in the second application period. And Western Lane unfortunately didn't make that.
Yeah, I got it in at 2 o'clock that day instead of 8 o'clock when it first opened, and all the funds were already gone.
I think it was $100 million I think they had available.
Aren't we like 26 on the list or something? Or
We were, I don't know what we are now, but yeah.
Okay, back to Rick Yesney. Will you please work with Dina and take care of your suggestion?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, I will. Thanks.
Okay. Budget Committee. Jody, do you have any questions about the budget in any area you want to ask?
I just want to clarify that we are looking at proposed budget number 2 in all of the documents, not budget number 1, correct? Or is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, that was my only clarification all the way through, was to make sure that I was looking, and that includes the WLFIA.
No, we're looking at budget number 1 in WFIA.
Okay. I just needed that clarification, so thank you.
Joel, any
Are we
questions?
on tab 8 right now?
We are on any tab you want to ask a question about.
Oh, that's fun. Good. Let me ask you something here. I've gone through this budget and I'm still trying to figure out on tab 8, budget 2, you've got the revenues at 892,788 and the expenses at the same amount, 892,788. So you've got a balanced budget, but I'm not sure I feel like it's a balanced budget. Am I wrong?
You need to use budget 1 in that section that has the total of 895,208
It's still balanced.
plus $100,000 in materials and services. That's the numbers we're using.
So I think we need to help Joel understand that what that is that's like a subsidiary budget. So WFIA has that budget. It's split 51-49%, and those two portions get applied against SVFR's budget and Western Lane Ambulance budget. So don't look at that like a balanced budget. That's just an expense budget only. There's no revenue there. So those two numbers get split, and you'll see that number in the Western Lane budget. I think, what was the split number, 505 or something? I can't remember.
507 something.
Yeah,
Right.
I saw that.
Right. That's the number you need to look at.
That's what makes it complicated, because I'm looking at total expenditures, total revenue, but then when you get the WFIA in there, so then the WLAD is running a deficit.
Now, Western Lane is paying 51% of the expenses for WellFIA. WellFIA has no revenue base. All the money for WellFIA comes from the two agencies, the two parent agencies.
Joel, that $507,566,
right,
showing on the materials and services summary under the administration portion.
Yeah.
That is where it is showing in our actual budget document expenditure. Under WFIA Administrative Services.
That's tab 4.
I'm sorry, I don't have tabs.
Yeah, it's tab 4.
Thank you, Cindy.
No, we've moved people from both agencies into WellFIA, so these aren't new hires. These are not new expensive. We've just moved the expenses into WellFIA. So Western Lane and SCFR are paying for the same people, but instead of paying through their own personnel services budget, they're paying it to WellFIA to cover those personnel service expenses.
Did we answer your question, Joel?
Yeah.
Thank you. RJ, anything?
I guess all I can say is that I don't feel that we've gone far enough with the operations dollars. I don't think a freeze is adequate to be able to turn these things around. I have quite a few things that we can do that, but you've said that that's not our purview.
What? No. What? It's. You can, if you have a recommendation, RJ, about staffing levels or salaries, please submit those to the board of directors as an information item, or come to a board meeting and speak before us, and then we can take it under advisement.
Well, I just think that the contract that we have right now is bearing us, and things need to change drastically for this organization to survive. So as it states right now with the dollars that are in this proposal, I would be a no on this budget.
Okay, thank you. Rick Yesney, any questions or comments on this budget?
I don't have any further questions or comments on the budget.
Larry?
Yes, if you look at I think it's tab 2, not sure. But if you look at the general fund and revenue and expenditure summary, let's ignore the beginning fund balance and just look at the budget from a P&L standpoint. We have revenues of $3,719,000, and we have expenses of $3,769,000, which means we're going to operate at a loss of about $50,000. Now, add to that the fact that we're not properly funding the capital budget, and we're also not putting enough in PERS, in my opinion. So I don't think this budget is something to be gleeful about. It's not something that I see being sustainable. I mean, it's getting better, but I don't see that revenue is covering expenses.
Could I make just, and Larry, I agree with what you're saying. That's why it's important to me to show the transfer to PERS not as an expense, because actually we are presenting a responsible budget with probably a $200,000 to $250,000 bottom line at least. And I know that's not a lot, but it's trying to right the ship at least in this year. But that's why it's important to me that transfer go in as a fund balance reserve for PERS and we're not spending it. So it's just a
Rick, that's why you're a CPA and I'm a financial analyst. So the way I look at it is,
well, we're lucky we're not actuaries.
Yeah, I understand. But what I'm looking at is our budget should reflect a set aside for our debt. We owe probably $3 million in PERS liabilities. So whether that's a loan payment you have to make to a bank to pay off that debt, if it were a loan payment, you would call that a debt and an obligation and an expense budget. So it makes no difference to me whether or not we put it in a side account. We're trying to set money aside to pay the bill when it comes due. So this budget is still underwater, and we haven't set aside enough for capital. And we have fundamental problems in this district. If you go back to the chief's charts, with this budget, if you look at the chief's graph, it's hardly a turnaround situation. It's just more of the same problems where we slowly run out of money and die.
Cindy?
I have no questions at this time.
Mike?
I'm good. No questions.
Are we to the point where you folks need another budget committee meeting or to make a motion to recommend this budget to the board of directors? If we're ready to make a motion to recommend to the board of directors and take a vote, which we have to do, would somebody please make a motion? And it's on the bottom of the agenda.
Well, I would make a motion to approve the proposed budget for the 2021 fiscal year.
And you are who?
And this is Rick, I am sorry.
Thank
Rick,
you.
In the amount of, I'm scrolling down trying to find the number.
Line 33, I think.
Line 33, $5,819,220.
This is Jody, I second.
Have a first and a second. Any further discussion on that motion?
If
not,
I have a question.
Joel,
If
go
this
ahead.
motion does not pass, what is the next, or if there's a tie vote, what is the next procedure?
The
Plan on
budget
another
officer,
committee
chief,
meeting. we would plan on another meeting
And
hopefully get some suggestions on what we needed to change. Keeping in mind that with labor negotiations, I mean, that confuses the picture a lot.
did that answer your question, Joel?
Well, it does, except that as a budget committee member, according to earlier in the meeting, we can't know, or I guess the board too, we can't know what is going on in those negotiations. So it makes it very difficult to make it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Joel. And it would have been much better to have negotiations completed by now. And we should have, well, there were things just out of our control. And unfortunately, it's overlapping with budget negotiation or with budget committee meeting. But yeah, no, we should have had it done.
And Joel, I anticipate what would happen after union negotiations are settled, and say if the board approves a budget, and I anticipate that would be done before union negotiations are settled. After they're settled, the board has the ability to adjust the budget by a 10% margin up or down. If it's more than that, I imagine we would reconvene the budget committee and have discussions.
No, actually, it would just, you have to hold a public meeting is all.
Okay, there's something we have to do. I'm glad you know.
Yes.
RJ has a question.
RJ, go ahead.
You know, I honestly feel that this budget needs to be worked over a little bit more. I realize that there's negotiations going on, but I feel that the proposed budget should reflect exactly what the district wants and their bottom line. And then have us vote on that. If the negotiations don't go as needed, then have your public meeting and you got to do what you got to do. But I don't think that this budget is anywhere close to what it needs to be. And I think it needs to be thinned out.
Anybody else have any comments? If not, we have a motion on the floor that needs to be voted on. If that motion is passed, this budget is recommended to the board of directors, and they can have discussions and make changes up to 10% at the board level. If that motion fails, then we would have the chief and Dina. If it fails, I would have everybody send an email with their concerns to the chief and Dina, them and probably council president, Mr. Yesney, and probably vice chair Larry would get together with our board recommendations, and they would present us with a new budget at our next budget committee meeting. But now I need to call for a roll call vote on the motion that was made. Holly, if you're still there, would you do?
Yep.
Roll
Meeting
call vote,
committee
please?
members, Jody O'Mara,
Yes.
RJ Pilcher,
Nay.
Joel Marks,
Nay.
Director Yesney,
Yes.
Director Russell,
Yes.
Director Farnsworth,
No.
Director Webb,
Yes.
Director Murphy.
No. So we have a tie vote. Chief, do you know what motion fails due to a tie vote?
So we will schedule another committee meeting. We'll get availability. As you directed the committee, if they could send in, I don't know, John. I mean, it's
the new land we're in, COVID-19 and the board. We are.
Well, and plus it's just labor negotiations. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
I'm not sure what we're going to accomplish in another meeting, but I think that's what we have to do.
yep. And everybody, please send their emails to the chief. And remembering that there are some things like RJ talked about and the chief agreed with, of knocking some of them line items down, but that might only amount to $20,000 in those little lines that we talked about. So we'll see what they come up with, and then we'll have a budget meeting and start all over.
Okay, we're proposing May 26th, which is in just less than 2 weeks. It's a Tuesday night, 5 o'clock.
Okay, and also, could all you committee members please have the information to the chief and Dina by Friday at 5 o'clock, please?
Okay, you're proposing the 26th, but have the submissions by the 22nd.
Well, I would need to put together, it takes quite a while to put together a revised budget. So if we could have all the revisions in at least a minimum a week from today, if not sooner.
Okay, so you're talking about the 21st, and we would meet the 26th. Is everyone available that date?
I have a question before you get that date, and Dina would probably have the answer and the chief would have the answer. By law, when does this budget have to be in?
The
June
board has to adopt it prior to June 30th.
June 30th.
And we have a tentative budget hearing date set for June 18th.
So now, John, these comments, we wouldn't actually make a new budget because each of the comments would have to be approved by the committee, correct?
The things that will be coming to you, chief, you can change the budget document, save the old one, make changes, and see what it looks like.
Make what changes?
That's
Well,
what you'll receive.
Whatever you receive from the budget committee members. I mean, obviously, you're not going to make changes to the budget that says fire 5 paramedics. We're not going to do that. But in other items of savings that people find, and
A lot of it was talked about tonight.
That's true.
Well, it's a little difficult if everybody provides their input and we're trying to accommodate everybody's request. That makes it a little difficult. I mean, we could have a crazy budget. I mean, I think
the best way to do it is just to have the budget as we have it now and then put comments beside it, those numbers, and then the committee can discuss it.
And I think maybe, Chief, when you get everything compiled by next Thursday, when you get everything in, maybe budget chair, myself, and board chair Rick Yesney will come in and meet with you and Dina also.
Okay. I'm out of town all next week, but we can do a virtual meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can do a virtual meeting.
Okay. Is that agreeable to everybody?
I have a suggestion.
Go ahead, Jody.
Instead of everybody emailing the chief, what if everybody emailed the budget chairman, John Murphy, and then John, because some of them might be overlapping, and then when you do meet with Rick and Chief Schick, then and Dina, maybe you have it all together to compile, that's been compiled, to meet with him to share rather than him. I don't know.
Yep, I think that's a good idea, Jody. And the reason I would like you involved, Rick, to see if any of these go against current board policy.
Sure.
Okay, let's do that, folks. So our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for Thursday, 5/26
Tuesday,
at 5 p.m.
Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday.
Tuesday, excuse me.
John, we're going to need your email.
It's John, John, at coastinsurance.com. My cell number is 541-991-0514.
So that's John at coastinsurance.com.
Yes, sir. Any other information anyone needs before I adjourn the meeting?
Do we need to set the permanent tax rate, or do we have to wait till we approve the budget to do that?
We wait till we approve the budget. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned at 7:32.
Okay, thank you all. Thanks, John, for running the meeting.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye, everybody.